So I'm Joe Gamez. I'm the director of St. Elmo Brady STEM Academy. And I'm a PhD student here in civil engineering. And so what I'm going to talk to you guys about today is really the importance of outreach. It's something I feel very, very passionate about. And kind of in the course of this discussion, I'm going to talk about some of the more practical things, how we run and why we do what we do and things like that. But before we get into it, let me just first say thank you to the folks here for inviting me to talk. I'm honored that I popped up on the radar and that I got this invitation. So again, thank you for the invitation. So just briefly what we're going to cover these things here. Who am I? I want to tell you a little bit about who I am, where I come from, and how I came to find myself in this outreach position. I'm also going to cover a little bit about the St. Elmo Brady STEM Academy, what we do, how we do it, things like this, some of our best practices involving parents and mentors and things like that, and also how we can improve on it if anybody is also in a position to run or is interested in starting up a STEM Academy. And this is really what I wanted to focus on right here, why outreach to underrepresented students is very important. And in addition to that, I want to talk about how outreach has affected our students really on a short-term basis, because we don't have the data that shows how it affects them on a long-term basis, and also how it's affected me. And when I say how it's affected me, what I mean is why it should be important to you all as people who are in mentorship positions or as students who want to get involved. So like I mentioned, I'm a PhD student in civil engineering, specifically geotechnical engineering. I'm a student now, but I wasn't always a student. I was in the Air Force for about 7 or 8 years. And my Air Force career took me from places like Kansas, which is funny because you join the service to see the world and they send you to Kansas. But it took me from Kansas to Iraq, which is where this picture's from, and then subsequently to Guam and then Afghanistan. Now my career was actually quite varied. I did things like I poured concrete. Here I am in Iraq with one of our crews pouring concrete for some of our structures. Oops. In Afghanistan, I was actually doing some missions on horseback. And we were building a school in a rural area, so that's why we had the horses. And, I hiked up a mountain to survey a road. In 2009, for the presidential election out there, my team and I surveyed some roads to make sure that people could walk to the polls. And, it was really exciting. It was really exciting, and I thought it was fulfilling. At the time, I completely thought it was fulfilling. And it's almost like you don't know what you don't know. And this is really where things turn around, because I met this girl right here, and her name's Fatima, and I think she was about 10. We actually don't know how old she was, because in Afghanistan, especially in the rural areas, people don't really know when they were born. They just don't keep track of it. But meeting her was one of the points in my life that was quite important. And so she lived about just a few hundred feet from one of the girls' schools that we were building in actually a really rural area. And when we first met her, she was really shy, and she really didn't know what she wanted in life. And that could be for many reasons, maybe because she was just a little kid, or maybe she didn't have options. I don't know. I really don't know. But over the course of 10 months, my team and I, we would frequently visit her. So maybe 3 or 4 times a month, we'd go check the school, and she'd come running out, and we'd talk to her. And towards the end of my tour, she started talking about wanting to be an engineer. And I didn't realize it at the time, but this was one of the moments that really changed what I wanted in life. From this girl to really not wanting much to wanting to be something, and an engineer no less, it changed me. I don't know if she'll ever have that opportunity, but it certainly changed me. And I was so moved by it, I had my wife send me Illinois hats. I graduated here in 2004 in civil engineering. And so I gave her these hats, and interestingly enough, I left, and maybe 2 or 3 months after I left, one of the civilian team members who stayed said he saw these little orange hats bobbing up and down on the mountainside. And so like I said, this was a really important moment for me, and I'm going to leave the story here because it arcs around, and so we'll get back to it. And so aside from the introduction from me, I want to give an introduction to what St. Elmo Brady STEM Academy is exactly. And to do that, I'm going to let the founders of it tell you in their own words. So we got to give this a second to load up.
no one looked like me. I was the only African American woman in the entire department.
Like, I pick up on small things every day. I'll see that when I go into class, it'll be nobody sitting next to me.
If there aren't black engineers here at U of I honestly don't know where they're at.
African Americans are severely underrepresented. We have to do the right thing. We have to start to think creatively.
Come on, don't be shy. Let's go. Yay!
That was perfect. Oh, good. Try and let all of it go down.
My name is Donovan Chambers. I am in 4th grade, and this is my dad.
And I'm Reuben Chambers.
This program is named after St. Elmo Brady. He was the first African American man to get a PhD in chemistry at the University of Illinois. And I think it's important because he was an African American, and we're all in this program African American boys who are judged by just our skin color, and they're just trying to teach us that we could be great scientists, just like St. Elmo Brady.
My name is Ricky Greer, and my colleague and co-founder is Dr. Gerard Henderson, and we put together the St. Elmo Brady STEM Academy. Our program is in Champaign, Illinois, and so we target 4th and 5th grade minority boys, and we just want to expose them to new opportunities, new realities, and hopefully the students will consider STEM careers. Donovan is a great student of ours. He's really engaged in the program. He's really excited about the program. Donovan's father just seems to be really engaged in his education and really wants to be a great mentor towards him. I hope we've changed his son's life.
My people, minority people, don't use science as a first, second, and sometimes third option. And you know, you have to train yourself. It's not about whether you're smart enough. You just have to educate yourself and become what you want to become. And that's what St. Elmo Brady fosters. One of the things that I'm participating in is the Saturday program. So it's an opportunity for Donovan and I to build some time together, to learn stuff together. It's kind of nice to also be a consistent face for the kids that come in here, and they get used to you and they're high-fiving you. So that's really a great experience because we're building a bond. I'm meeting other kids. I'm being able to be, on some level, a role model because they see our relationship.
More fun when you're there.
All right.
So that was Ricky Greer, and you saw Gerard Henderson up there, and they were faculty and staff over in chemical engineering, or chemical and micro, I never get it right, it's Chibi, the Chibi department. And so both of them left in the summer of 2016, and when they left, they passed the program on to me. And so I've been doing this for about 2 semesters now, I guess on my own. So, you know, to reiterate what they were saying, we really just seek to give our students a positive STEM experience. We want them to leave these sessions. We want them to come in and see a session on chemical engineering, see a session on mechanical engineering, or what have you. And we want them to leave that session and say, that was really fun. And that was cool, and I want to be that when I grow up. And so that's really what all this is about, to expose them to these opportunities and show them that these are good opportunities. So how do we do this? Well, we partner with a lot of people, a lot of departments throughout the university. And so we're partnering with different units like the Institute of Genomic Biology, different research groups. There's a couple in Chibi that we partner with. There's one in mechanical engineering, Dr. Wagner Johnson. We haven't done an activity with her research group yet, but there's one upcoming. And we work with graduate groups and undergraduate groups also. So the way we do this then is we ask each of these collaborators to come in and conduct an activity. Typically we run on an after-school basis. So we're running our program on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. And so our collaborators would come in on these days and present their lessons, and the lessons would build on each other. And so the students would get a week of exposure to this particular discipline. The way we've been running now, because of some budgeting issues, we've been a Saturday-only program. And it's been good, but it's not as impactful, we'll say, as this after-school program. So when the money starts coming in, I've got my fingers crossed, we're going to move back to an after-school program. Now, as far as some of our best practices, I really have to say that the format we have is one of our greatest strengths. So I guess what they used to do is they used to do all the programming themselves, and doing three programs, 3 sessions a week at 2 schools. That's one thing I should have mentioned. We're at Booker T. Washington and Garden Hills. So to do that amount of programming over the course of 8 weeks is gigantic, and it's a huge time drain, and it can get expensive with materials and things like that. So by having these collaborators come in, we can not only do a wide range of STEM activities as opposed to something kind of generic or general that we would do. So we can have this wide range of activities presented by people who are passionate about the activities. So this really has expanded, I think, our impact and has increased it, in fact, because the kids pick up on this passion very, very much so. Another best practice, while we're talking about best practices here, is that and this was mentioned in the video, is that we encourage parent or mentor involvement. And you'd be surprised how influential parents or mentors can be on these kids. And really, they serve to counteract the pressures of some of these social norms, which is something that I'm battling right now, and I'll get into that a little later. And finally, the last best practice that I have to talk about is we do another thing called Scientist of the Week, where we highlight a minority who is a scientist who's also of note. And so when kids see people who look like them doing things that they never thought they could do for themselves, it's quite impressive. And last year, what we did is we had a science fair, and at the science fair, the kids picked an experiment that builds on something they did previous, and also they would pick a Scientist of the Week. So a lot of times things like astronauts, having, for example, African-American astronauts or Hispanic astronauts means a lot to these kids. So between those 3 things, the format where we have our collaborators come in, the Scientist of the Week, and having mentor involvement, that's really the strength of our program. And so moving on, so some of our collaborators, kind of going back to our collaborators, we do have a large, it's not large enough, we do have a lot of collaborators though. You can see they're from all over the place, American Vacuum Society, Astro Illini. We've also got some student groups here, the Entomology Graduate Student Organization. They're going to do, well, I'm hoping at least, they're going to do an insect petting zoo, which would be a lot of fun for the students. We also got this is a class. This is, I think it's Engineering 498 or something like that. It's Engineering Social Justice, so they're going to come and do a session. But we've got a lot of people who are excited to contribute. And like I said, that passion really makes it through to the kids. Now, one thing to note right here is we've got Krannert on here. So Sam Smith from Krannert has been active with us. And I think that's important too, because the arts kind of suffers from the same issue of underrepresentation as STEM does. And not only that, Sam Smith does a great job integrating STEM topics into his arts outreach. We've also got things like, we get laboratories. We get volunteers from Uni High, which is nice. So we get some high school kids who want to put themselves out there and do something and contribute. So it's a great opportunity for people to contribute. Now, so there's a couple things that we focus on. Underrepresented, of course, we focus on underrepresented and 4th and 5th graders. And the 4th and 5th graders is what I mentioned earlier, where there's research, and I can get the references if anybody's interested, but it would appear that interest in STEM peaks right around 4th and 5th grade and subsequently drops sharply. So we want to catch them at that peak and try to keep the interest high. Now, there is an issue there because there's really not another follow-on program, so we do need this pipeline. We need a pipeline. That's a whole nother discussion, though. But yeah, essentially, we want to capture that interest before it drops. Now, so why underrepresented? And I got to laugh at this picture because on the stock photo site that I was using, this is the only one I could find for confused. It's the most ridiculous one, but here we go. So why underrepresented? Why is it important to do outreach to underrepresented kids? And this is something I'm really passionate about because of my daughter. This is when she was about a month after she was first born. I went to Target to go buy her a bib. And so I get to Target, and I go to the baby aisle, and the first thing I see are bibs for boys, and each bib has a different print on it. And each print is, each print is, for the boys, boys can be anything. You want to be an astronaut? There's an astronaut print. There's a doctor print. There's a policeman print. Boys can be anything. And I'm like, oh, this is great. This is great. So I get to the girls section. Why not just be fabulous for the girls, Oh, you're a girl? Why not be a princess or a fairy? Why not the I'd rather be shopping prince? And this is something that shocked me. This is absolutely shocking to me because what does this say about our society's expectation of girls, an underrepresented group in STEM? And really this bleeds into what they think they should be doing as they get older. Okay, so the man is holding us down via a bib conspiracy. But so I guess I still haven't answered the question, why is this important? Well, I'm going to answer that with another story, right? And so my wife, she often gets me watching things, whether it's on like Netflix or Amazon Prime. I love Downton Abbey, by the way. I'm not ashamed to admit it. But the latest thing she's been watching is Cristela, which is about, and this is on Netflix, and it's about a Mexican-American woman who's trying to make it as a lawyer in Texas somewhere. There's one episode in particular where, and it's about diversity, and her boss comes in and her boss is saying, oh, our company was rated poorly for diversity, so we need to do something about it. And another subplot of that story is that there's a theatric production of West Side Story, and Cristela wants to bring her nephew. And so going back to the workplace issue, her boss wants Cristela to take pictures of her being a lawyer so they could put it on the website. And then as far as the production of West Side Story goes, Cristela's brother-in-law, her nephew's father, doesn't want her to go because it's so un-Mexican. Like Mexicans, we don't go to the theater. And I'm Mexican. But so as far as the pictures go, as the story pans out, Cristela's more than happy to do it because she wants people to see pictures of her. And she wants people to see pictures of minorities in these kind of roles because she wants people to know that it's normal for minorities to do these things. And the same thing goes for the theater. She fights for her nephew to go to the theater because she wants him to know that it's normal for Mexicans to go to the theater. And that really speaks to the heart of what we're trying to do. We want these kids to know that it's normal for them to do these things, and pursuing these careers and being interested in these things is completely normal. And another story here. So last spring, for the first session, and so our kids stay with us from 4th to 5th grade, and so every semester we have new kids coming in. And so with that in mind, let me elucidate this story. So for the first session, I had the kids draw what they wanted to be when they grew up. And so for the new kids, almost to a T, almost every new kid drew a picture of a microphone or they drew a picture of a jersey. And when I asked them, like, oh, why'd you draw this? They wanted to be rappers or they wanted to be athletes, and that's just what they were exposed to. It's quite interesting to see how exposure affects what their outcome is or what they expect. And so I say almost every kid drew a microphone or a jersey because there was 2 kids who didn't. And one was a white kid and one was an Asian kid. And sure, it's not a huge group to make this judgment on, but that kind of falls in with, I think, our stereotype of what we expect kids of certain ethnic groups to be. So maybe this bib conspiracy does have something to it. So what effect does this outreach have on these kids? And excuse me. I've been fighting this cough for like 3 or 4 months. It's ridiculous. So let me be a realist here and say, and I mentioned it before, we don't know what the outcome is because for these kids, we just, we don't have enough data. This program's only been going on for 3 or 4 years. And so we don't know where they've been ending up. But, on the other hand, there is a marked difference in these kids. This kid right here, Joe, in particular, he's 10, well, I guess now he's 12 because this this was 2 years ago. He wants to be a paleontologist. And I mean, that's really cool, because when I was 10 or 11 or 12, I just wanted, like, I don't know, I wanted to work in Baskin Robbins because, man, I loved ice cream. So for this kid to be at that age wanting to be something, I think speaks volume on the short-term effect, at least, of outreach.
You know, it works. My 5-year-old grandson wants to be a paleontologist too. He's grabbing every book he can on dinosaurs.
Yeah, this guy would come in and he had like a dinosaur toy. He's like, Joe, check this out. I'm like, that's awesome, man. And I actually hooked him up with a lab down here in the hopes that we could keep his interest up. But without this, without this pipeline, I don't know what he's doing now. Maybe he's more interested in basketball or music or something like that, But yeah, I think it's amazing. I think it's absolutely amazing. And going back to, how influential parents and mentors can be. Like I said, this is something I'm dealing with right now. I've got a 4-year-old, and she's going to daycare. And she's been going to daycare for a few years now. And she used to love Thomas the Tank Engine. Absolutely loved it. Would not stop watching Thomas the Tank Engine. And then one day she just dropped it all of a sudden. And she wouldn't tell me why. Ooh, excuse me. She wouldn't tell me why, but from what I could gather from her, there was a boy at school teasing her about liking Thomas the Tank Engine. So she had a shirt that she would wear to daycare all the time. And some boy was teasing her about it because girls aren't supposed to like trains. And it's really disappointing. But I try to guide her away from that, to let her know that it's normal. And so she'll still watch Thomas, and she has Thomas pajamas, but I haven't convinced her to wear her Thomas shirt anymore. But like I said, this is why it's important, because people have to know, especially underrepresented groups have to know that these things are normal. So now I want to kind of go back on how this all affected me, because I think that's an important part of outreach, is how it affects the participants. And I forgot where. I think I saw this on Reddit, and I just added the quote. I don't know. But so yeah, I want to talk about why this is so important to me, how it affected me, and how anybody who's interested in this kind of stuff or in a position to mentor people in this kind of stuff, why it should be important. And so we're going back to Fatima here. And so when I came back from this deployment, I found my regular job to be kind of unfulfilling and unchallenging. This deployment right here was kind of a once-in-a-lifetime thing. I don't think I'd ever find myself on horseback, for example, or I don't think I'd ever find myself, in another IED attack or this and that. It was a once-in-a-lifetime thing. And I don't know, I wanted to make a difference, but I just didn't know exactly how to do it. It just so happened that one day I was driving home and I was listening to WILL, and I heard this story about Brady STEM Academy, and I heard Ricky Greer's name and Gerard Henderson's name, and I just kept repeating it so I didn't forget it, and I drove home as fast as I could, and I emailed them about getting involved. The rest is history. But that's how it all started. And, being involved is tough. It's really tough, but that's why it's so fulfilling. There was one day in particular that I was at Garden Hills. So before I took over as director, I was the program manager at Garden Hills. And so I get there a little bit early to set everything up, and I'm walking down the hall, and the gym teacher, who's actually a huge mentor for the kids out there, he's like, it's one of those days. And it just so happened to be that it was raining that day, and so when it's raining, the kids don't go outside for recess, and they just go buck wild. They go bananas because they've got all this pent-up energy, and here they are after school, and I don't know any kid who would rather be in class after school, rather than kicking a soccer ball or playing video games or something. So, it was a rough day. Within five minutes or so, we got kids arguing and pushing each other. It's tough because a lot of the kids too that we have in this program, they don't have much else, according to the gym teacher. So anyway, we get started, and what's making this whole thing worse, than the rain and the kids being rowdy is that the presenter for the day kind of picked an inappropriate activity. The activity consisted of a 30-minute lecture, which is way too long for after school, and about a 5-minute activity. So the kids were bored. They're doing anything to keep their attention going. They're throwing stuff, they're acting out, and we just cannot get them under control because there's really nothing we can do when there's, the activity is so easy. And all this is happening as the vice principal's walking down. And I can feel judgment from 50 feet away. I can feel her judging me, and I'm like, oh man, this is not gonna be good. And so the activity ends, and I'm walking out, I feel defeated. And I really, at that point, I really felt like man, I'd rather be back in Afghanistan being shot at than back there trying to wrangle all these kids. And so I'm walking out, and the vice principal sees me, and she's like, it wasn't that bad. I'm like, well, thanks. Thanks for that. And so a couple weeks later, I see one of the parents at Walmart, and so I'm there with my wife and my daughter, and she's talking to my wife about how much the program means to her and her grandson. And that's when it clicked, That's when it absolutely clicked why this is so worthwhile. And I skipped a slide here. It's a herding cat slide. We can skip that though. But it absolutely clicked. Like this is where I fit in. This is what I'm supposed to do. And I think as a student or as a mentor, this is what we want for our young folks. I feel by saying folks, that makes me seem really old. For our younger students, this is what we want. We want them to find themselves. And I found Waldo right here. For those of you who don't know, this is Where's Waldo. You got to find Waldo. And it took me 30 minutes to find him right here. I had to Google Waldo search pattern, and I found him. But anyway, so this is what we want, I think, as for our students and for ourselves. We want to find out where we fit in. We want to find out what we stand for and how we can make the world better. But I think one of the benefits of this kind of work really is that to do this kind of work, you've got to do things that set you apart from your peers. You've got to put yourself out there for people to judge you. You've got to be assertive. You've got to learn to plan, manage a program, and lead people. And you've got to learn to connect with others to accomplish your goal. And in fact, running Brady STEM Academy really is the hardest exercise in leadership that I've ever done. And to be sure, I've led teams from tens of people to over 100 of people. And I've led programs. I've managed programs that are worth, almost $200 million. But this is the hardest thing I've ever done because nobody has to do anything you ask of them. So you're just going out there and you're putting yourself out there. But I think these skills for our younger students, this is what we want to develop in them. And so we can not only develop the student, but we can develop the community while we're at it. And in fact, my approach to this whole thing, and that kind of permeates everything I do, is I'm just a shameless dummy now. Sometimes I'll go into an office and be like, hey, can you help us out? Sometimes people are like, ew, no, who are you? Get out of my office. And sometimes they're really happy to help. But these are skills that I think we need to develop. So to me, outreach it's been a way for me to give back. It's been a way for me to find myself, to establish myself, to find things that I stand for. And it could be the same for you also. So thank you. Any questions or anything?
This is really neat because it's exciting when it happens, and we've all been there. How do we get this whole group to improve their academic performance, because they're all totally capable? Mm-hmm. We've talked about this ad nauseum here. How do we get them to perform their academic performance and learning and mastering the arithmetic and the math that they need and the science? Mm-hmm. Because all these kids are totally capable. There's something that's happening.
Yeah.
So when we look at the schools, we look at the school tests, or we're in the classroom,
I feel like
we're going to end up with these kids that they can't add, subtract, multiply, divide. They can't do any of this stuff, and yet they're capable. And somehow the initiative or the motivation for them to learn this and master this is not there. It's kind of like, well, give me the calculator.
Yeah.
And then the calculator's, you were in a world situation. I've been over there too, where there ain't no power, baby. You better have a slide rule.
Yeah, yeah.
How, you know, I mean, I'm not looking for an answer, but it's
Yeah.
kind of like,
No, I know
we
exactly.
got a real problem because the transition from hearing the excitement to doing it requires, and then when we look at what's happening in the schools, we got maybe 6, 8, or 10% at the high school level that are graduating in math at a grade level necessarily even going to college.
Yeah, yeah. I know exactly what you're getting at, because we see the same thing, and especially with our kids. When I was at Garden Hills is a high poverty school. And so a lot of kids come from, you know, single parent or a single guardian household.
They come from a war zone called.
Yeah, there was one student, his grandma literally lived around the corner, but he couldn't walk home because there was a drive-by shooting. You know, one of the weeks, you know, just it was like a week or so into the spring semester. But you're right, and it's really complicated because we have kids who can't do simple things like add or subtract fractions or anything like that, and they give up really easy, so they kind of don't have this grit.
But they're totally capable. It's frightening.
Yeah, they are totally capable, and the only thing I could say that I noticed, you know, so anecdotally, I noticed that the students whose parents were at the program, we had one student whose dad showed up every day that we were in session.
That kid's going to excel and run with it.
Yeah, exactly. And so the kids whose parents who had mentors who were involved really excelled. And so that, you know, that's one of the reasons that we really encourage mentor or parent involvement, is because if it's important to the parent or mentor, then that reflects in the student. But what's difficult is that we had one student, for example, his dad worked a minimum wage job at Popeyes. And so for him to take time off or even to be interested in his son's education is very difficult, because, you know, is he going to take time off to come on Saturday for, you know, and he's earning so little. So it's such a complicated thing, but I feel like it really takes a village to raise a kid. And so that kind of interest, I think interest from parents and mentors, from my limited experiences, is really what has made the difference in some of these students. And, you know, to comment on something else where the students are completely capable, we had one activity, for example, where it was from that video, actually, where they were shooting off those little rockets. So it was a film canister, and they put Alka-Seltzer in there, and they could select either vinegar or water to put in there, and so pressure would build up and it'd pop off. The kids were supposed to put a cone on the top of it, you know, to make it look like a rocket. And one kid he could not cut out a cone and tape it on his canister, and he completely started freaking out. And it's such a small thing, but that really translates poorly into life.
Was he having problems just with manipulative skills, or he just didn't know how to do it? It
was just, you know, he just couldn't do it. I think he was used to doing things like that, and, you know, so he was just frustrated that he couldn't do it.
And then he gave up immediately.
And then he gave up immediately. And I'm sitting there talking to him for 20 minutes, trying to get him to just participate, and he just didn't want to. But, you know, from what I knew of his home life, it wasn't that good. And his parents, you know, he was from a poor family, and they were just always working. And I think it was just a value or a quality that was never instilled in him. And so, like I said, in my limited view, I feel like a lot of it just comes back to guidance from parents or mentors. Yeah.
I think that's a really important and impressive thing that this program is doing that I haven't seen in a lot of other programs, is getting parents involved, like trying to get the fathers there.
Yeah.
To be there and participating, not just the kids coming in, parents drop them off or send them on a bus or something.
Yeah, it's really important. And I know there's some research too that there was Dr. Henderson and a few others put together a proposal. They had the research that showed, you know, that parent or mentor guidance really increases the performance of the kids. You know, I wish we could get more parents to do it, but out of maybe 20 or 30 kids, there was probably about 5 or 6 kids who had their parents come.
But then you go back into the history of the same thing. How many of the parents even understand what you're talking about, you're doing, so they can even relate to it and talk about with the child?
Right. And so that, you know, there's a real struggle to make it relevant to the parents also. We did one activity that was related to pressure and volume, and
good old PBT.
Yeah, exactly. And And this was shortly after Inflategate. And so I brought up Inflategate. And one of the parents was like, oh yeah, you know. And so he's talking to his son about it. And so it is a real struggle to get the parents involved. But if you can find that one little nugget that gets them interested, and they're all about it. It's tough. It really is tough. I'm telling you. And when I say like, oh man, I'd rather be shot at, because when I was out there, if I said go do this or go do that or stand over there, it's something as simple as stand over there, like people would do it. But with the kids, like you can't make them. And same with the parents, you can't make them do anything unless they want to. And so that's the biggest struggle I've had, I think.
You mentioned that this semester you had to go, or this year you had to go to the Saturday programs. And you mentioned funding. Do you mostly get funding like within the university, private donors?
Yeah. So previously it was a mix of both, and kind of towards the I guess it was spring of last year, I want to say. I think the money started running out. And so the biggest issue is not necessarily materials or anything like that, because like I mentioned, the collaborators will bring that all in, but it's paying the staff, because it is a huge time sink. So when we're doing after school activities, just to get there early to prepare, I'm leaving campus at probably about 2:20 to get there, to get everything set up for a 3 o'clock or 3:15 start time, depending on which school it was. And so, for example, we have one guy who he's like, I can't do after school because now I've got to pick up more hours on my other job and this and that. But so yeah, the staff costs a lot. And then, so what we do on Saturdays also, or at least what we used to do, is we used to pick the kids up, because that's a huge issue. Like I mentioned, some parents, they're both working minimum wage jobs with non-regular hours, so they can't drop off the kids. So we can't pick up the kids right now. But yeah, it was a mix of school and private donor funding.
Garden Hills doesn't have an established after-school program?
They have several after-school programs, but I don't think they have a STEM one oriented for underrepresented groups. And I say underrepresented groups also. We actually take everyone who's interested. The way we get the majority of our students is by selecting the specific schools. So Garden Hills, majority, minority population.
Do you also have need for staffing, or do you have enough people volunteering, or not volunteering?
So what do you need?
Yeah.
What's what you need?
Oh, yeah. If that's the question, yeah. Well, I'm gonna put money aside, because it is hard to find people who are quite dedicated to the program, because it does take up so much time. So for me, for example, I usually spend every morning at least an hour or so doing something Brady related, whether it's calling people, visiting people, setting things up, and so it's a huge time sink. And that kind of commitment, to have that kind of passion, I guess it's hard to find. So people who are passionate about outreach, yes, we could definitely use people who are passionate about outreach. We could use more collaborators, just to have a wider variety of selection for the kids. But really, I think it's more of a people issue, because, it's just, there's a lot of, as students, there's a lot of competing factors, and most of the students that are with the program are going to be on the younger side. So there's some, so it's hard to, schedule a meeting, or it's hard to get everybody to agree to something or whatever. So the hardest thing is not necessarily people, but people who want to do this and who are passionate about it. So that's the biggest thing. A close second, I'd have to say, would be the collaborators, but that's really just a function of me finding groups that do this kind of stuff and going out and talking to them. That's where my shameless dummy approach comes in, and it's been mostly successful, I'd have to say.
So is it a staff problem within the school that you're getting from, or a staff problem from the university, or a combination of both?
Well, it's just, I guess it would be, because people have to find us first of all. And so the people who do find us also have to be passionate about it. So it's not that the university is sending people to us. I guess it's us finding the right people, if that answers your question. Yeah, it's connecting with the right people. And usually I'll stumble across people because I'll try to slip it in when I meet somebody. And a lot of times they'll say, oh yeah, I'm interested, but maybe they won't show up to a meeting or something like that. So yeah, it's not necessarily the school sending us people, but us finding people, because we don't really have, I don't know, maybe we go quad day next year. Maybe that's what we do. But yeah.
So there are a fair number of people on this campus who contact us at the MSTE office who are looking for places to do.
Okay.
So we can probably help make some connections. And I apologize, I had to step out. So what is your time frame on Saturdays? What time?
Oh, I actually didn't mention that. It's 10 to 12 on Saturdays. And every once in a while we'll have, so at the end of the semester though, we've got, we've got a STEM-posium. We've got 5 or 6 different groups coming in, But anyway, generally it's 10 to 12 on Saturdays.
So just last week, the young women who do Make a Girl contacted us because they have a van full of 3D printers and computers, and they would like to do some outreach in local schools. So a 2-hour time period for them sounds pretty natural to me.
Yeah.
And so maybe, after this meeting is over, we'll get your schedule for next week and we can kind of look at some times. Because there are people who are on my plate right now for me to find them a place to go.
Yeah. That would be great. Yeah, seriously.
And, and for most of them, there's a fair number of early career grant people who are just starting their projects. The funding information has come to them in the last 2 or 3 months. And we'll help them make sure that their activities are appropriate. And so minimal work for you on that end. I guess the other question I have is, how many people do you usually like to have there?
From the collaborator side? So as far as the collaborator side goes, it's just however many people we want, because we have between the Brady staff and we get volunteers from Uni High, we've got more than enough people to cover the logistics and the classroom management. So as far as the collaborators go, it's just however many people they need to run their activity. Yeah. And then, I just got my train of thought derailed because I had a comment on what you just said. Anyway.
So you get to do this, you'll take it out and then go to the school itself, so you're either going to Booker T or you're going to Garden Hills, so you're going to the actual school. That's
a good question. So when we did the after-school activity, we actually went to Garden Hills every week. But now that we're Saturdays only, we generally go to the department that's hosting. So for example, last semester, IGB, the Institute of Genomic Biology, did a session. We went to the IGB. But in civil engineering, we've got a lot of floor space in our crane bay. So out of the 8 activities planned this semester, 5 of them are taking place in the crane bay. So space is not really too much of an issue. But if generally I'd say then, and I'm contradicting myself, generally I'd say we're doing it in the civil engineering building.
Yeah, because that's the whole idea. Whatever equipment you do, you got to get the equipment set up and moved and everything else. But if you've got one lab where you can set it up, but then how I guess that's where you're going to. How do you get the kids and the parents there?
Oh, okay. So it's just a matter of being in close contact with the parents, saying this week we're here. Of course, when we had the bus, we would probably pick them up and take them over. But now, all the logistics like that are coordinated with the parents. Yeah, so it's just a matter of staying in close contact and making sure they know every week. So that's, several newsletters and several group emails and stuff like that to the parents. Yeah. So it's not the best, but that's what we got at this point.
Have you ever thought about taking it out, like different schools? I mean, all the different schools we've taught at, we'll have a certain period of the day where we always have a study hall or a free period for prep. The kids are kind of in a study hall.
Yeah.
Have you thought about going and be able to do those in the school proper for like an entire school assembly or something?
No, actually, we haven't. No. I think that's something something to check out. I wonder how that would work at the schools, but I think I'll check that out.
Because I know what we did at Ader and Rantoul, I called Dave leak over at the planetarium, and I just said, okay, this is where we got the whole school, you know, you're studying all these periods, can you come?
Okay.
So he comes in, he's there for 2 periods, and he's got the entire school.
Yeah, that's actually a really cool idea. Yeah, I'm gonna make myself a note to talk to the principals about that, because one issue we're having also. Let me do this on. Actually, I'll do it right here. One issue we're having.
Because, you know, you figure if you got a 30 or 40 minute period of activity or demonstration at this grade level, that's even pushing the little kids' brains, you know, to the edge there, you know, after 40 or 50 minutes.
And I think that would also lead to good recruiting. So the issue we're having right now is recruiting, and that's always been an issue, but especially now because the people that I used to interact, the person that I used to interact with at Garden Hills, for example, she left and she's somewhere else. And so just getting buy-in, so we have buy-in from the faculty at Garden Hills and Booker T, but it's a different matter of having the teachers recruit kids and this and that. So I think doing something like that would actually be a great way to get more kids to join. All right, I actually really appreciated that suggestion. I think that might be it.
Yeah, that's good. Well, thank you very much for coming and talking to us.